Hi, welcome to the Pretty Intense podcast. I'm Danica Patrick. Thank you so much for listening. Today on the show is Aaron Alexander. He has an amazing method called the Alignment Method. He has a book called The Alignment Method. He has a podcast called The Alignment Podcast. He is also a movement coach and a manual therapist. All you have to do is check out his Instagram, which is Align Podcast is his Instagram, and check out just like how he moves and the things that he does with his body to create stacking and alignment. And I say that, but that's not actually what we talked a ton about in this episode. This episode had a lot to do with the emotions and your mind and your reality and just sort of like where your body stores tension and then how that sort of like shows up in your life as like, you know, if you are tense about a relationship, you tense your body up, and how there's no separation between the physical body and the mental emotional body. And, you know, even one of my favorite therapies, which I would have imagined to be a mental emotional therapy, he said is a somatic body therapy, which is EMDR, because it's a rapid eye movement. So it's like using the body to access information. And it's just, you know, the conversation was very, very deep and very, very flowy and very emotional, and really going into all the aspects that create our reality and the way that we show up and the challenges that we have, and essentially how we just get out of alignment with ourselves. So I hope you really like this episode. I hope you learn a lot. Please hit subscribe. And if you want notifications for the episodes, the bell. And please let me know what you think about this episode in the comments, and maybe some modalities that you use to help yourself both physically and mental emotional. How are you today?
I am well. I just got back from the gym. It's incredibly sunny. It's like, I think 75 degrees or something in Austin. So I've been spending a lot of time outside, which is good.
I was wondering where you lived. I wasn't sure if it was like California or...
No, I joined the mass migration to Austin, Texas. I'm a part of that.
In like 2020 or 2021?
2021? Yeah, a year and a half ago.
Oh, why?
I've been in LA for 5 years and was feeling like ready for some type of change in general. And then with all like the lockdown stuff and politics, I was kind of like good on hearing people's opinions about things, and also taxes, and then also community would be my bullet point list of why Austin was a reasonable place.
How about How about that list? Do you feel like have you checked it off?
Yeah. Austin.
What's the reality of Austin versus the idea of Austin?
What Austin lacks, I would say, is geographically, it's not that interesting. You know, it's like a lot of like rivers, you know, it's the most like normal place that I've lived in my life, other than I grew up in Pennsylvania, but I moved to Hawaii when I was 18, and then Boulder, Colorado, and then Bend, Oregon, and then Santa Monica. You know, so all the places I lived were very like idyllic places that, you know, from around the world be like, wow, that'd be amazing to go on vacation there. Austin's the first place that I've lived that feels like it's like Minnesota. You know, it's like, it's very like normal.
Come on now. Place. There's nothing Minnesota about Austin, Texas.
Just geographically, it's not like the postcard kind of reality that like Hawaii or Colorado is, for example.
Like I'm from the middle of nowhere in Illinois, so like Minnesota feels real similar, and I'd be like, no, Austin's way, way, way cooler and better than
it's way cooler and better. No, it's not Minnesota. It's the closest thing to that. Whereas LA is like very, you know, it's a bunch of dreamers and all the things. Austin is that now because a lot of that demographic came here. But it's just more normal, which I think is good. Like I'm saying normal in a good way. Like there's something nice about people that are, I think, a little bit more like down to earth in a way, a little bit more dependable. People that are like, cool, like we're here. Let's just be here. Whereas LA has more, I think, of a temperament of yearning for something else. Like we're all here for something else. Like, what are you here? I'm here to fulfill this dream.
Be an actor.
Yeah, whatever it is. And like whatever I'm at now, it's not this. Like I'm here to be somewhere else.
Ah.
there's certain places in the rest of America or United States that's a bit more like, oh, like, you know, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm an electrician and I have a family and I'm here. This is it. It's like, oh, cool. Like, that's great. Like, there's something kind of gratifying
feel
about
like
that.
you fit in. Did you fit into that I'm not where I want to be when you lived in California? Is that sort of part of the process of being in that area? Or do you feel like that was never you?
I fall into that category. That's been something I've been I think working on reconciling for a while.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah, we can. And that is something that I think I'm in process of finding more consilience with where I'm at and where I want to be, and just accepting myself in the moment and like now, and like, this is good. Like, I love me now. Like, I love my house. I love my car. I love what I'm doing. I love this conversation. Like, I love being here, compared to the possibility of most things being like means to an end. You know, does this lead me to there?
You
know,
and that's how you used to feel more of the time.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain magnetism of a place like Los Angeles, and I think I fell into like some of the stereotypical category of, I went there to like grow my business, grow my podcast, you know, get a book deal, and like, you know, make something of myself. And I was successful to at least semi-successful at doing that. So I'm very grateful to LA. I'm not like poo-pooing on LA in any capacity. But a part of that as well is being, or part of the life thing is finding gratitude and contentment and fulfillment with what you have in front of you, because you have so much probably. And then from there, building upon that, compared to building from a place of lack and anticipating feeling fulfilled once I arrive some other place. That's just, you know, a bunch of hooey.
What were some of those sort of shadow aspects that you feel like you confronted that helped you feel more at peace or content?
Well, I'm in therapy right now for the first time that I'm really like actively excited about therapy. I like look forward to it.
Everyone should be in therapy.
It's forever, so cool.
Forever. And
yeah, it's so good.
Therapy for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I used to, like 100 years ago, and I had many lifetimes ago, like therapy was for a relationship. Right. But like, that's just a Band-Aid in my opinion. Like, therapy is of the utmost importance, and it should always be for yourself.
Yeah. Well, so for me, a relationship is what catalyzed the necessity of said therapy, and the reflection of how much, how disconnected from all of myself that I've been, largely like childhood bits.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of self-abandoning, I guess I could say, and a lot of like young boy, even like baby statues of myself within myself, where it's kind of like frozen.
Like your like vision of your inner child is like very statuesque, like little boy.
Yeah, well, the statues in the sense that it's like aspects of myself frozen in time, because at some point in time I didn't have the resources or the capacity to address it. And I think that's the definition of trauma. And trauma is one of those words that gets tossed around a lot, particularly if you live in a place like Southern California, or Austin for that matter. And sometimes it can be
just Southern California.
Yeah. And so I historically have had somewhat of an allergy of sorts to different buzzwords like that, doing the work, trauma, you know, reparenting, inner child. And then you get involved and you're like, oh my God, this is it. This is actually a thing. I didn't know. I had no idea.
Holy shit, why am I crying right now? Oh my God, why am I crying right now?
Yeah. And having very clear visuals, like psychedelic level visuals, not psychedelic like sacred geometry spiraling out, you know, lizards crawling up my chest or anything, but psychedelic in the sense of just very vivid visuals of almost more clear than psychedelics, I would say, of myself as a baby, and feeling like lonely, feeling alone, and feeling afraid to love, and afraid to open myself up to love because I don't trust love, because I'm afraid that I will be hurt.
Again.
Again. And so a part of the like the visual that I've learned, the visual experience that I've had that's educated me, and now talking to my parents more, like one of the visuals I've had is my parents in kind of like a statuesque type form, almost like two chess pieces, like a king and queen, and looking away from me, but like wanting to look back, but not knowing how, or not how.
Yeah, they didn't have the tools.
They didn't have the tools, and so they were and are still in a lot of ways, maybe lack resources, or perhaps afraid in some way, or just calloused over in some aspects of like deep authenticity with their own access to intimacy and trusting of love.
Of course.
And then so within that, your parents love you to the max degree that they can.
Yep.
And they're hurt people, and they're lovely people, and they're beautiful people, and they're all of the things. But a part of that, most people also are a little hurt. And that's not everyone. Some people might have completely cleared their baggage of the past and their ancestry and all of that. I don't know. It could exist. I'm just not barring that out as an impossibility.
Okay.
Maybe there's some like bodhisattva figures out there that's like, no, I've really unpacked the shit. Like there is no more shit to unpack. I'm clear.
There is nothing left underneath this tree.
Yeah. My feeling is if a person was in that orientation, I don't know that they would hold a body anymore, which gets a little out there.
Oh my God. That's exactly the truth. No, I totally agree. Yes. I mean, through like psychedelics and seeing certain things, like understanding that this is not real and we agree to this. And part of me also has said, like, I wonder if certain things are just inherent with this experience of being a human. And if you didn't buy into these sort of constructs and have these polarity dynamics, I wonder if you'd even be here. Because when you know that it's not real, or you don't buy into the game, like I really truly wonder if you could hold form.
Yeah, you might not need to. I mean, that's the belief system. Western culture generally has a bit of dis-ease around the concept of death. It's like really sad, and it's like devastating, and it's a shame, and it's a travesty, and it's a question mark. And it's a lot of that. I don't think there's not a lot of definition around death as being something that's really beautiful, or something that's really like at least as beautiful as life, or as birth. And then perhaps even like there's I think maybe Ram Dass or Alan Watts or something like this has a bit of around, if you graduated early from the 4th grade and you like got sent to the 7th grade, it would be like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is not a bad thing. It's like, oh my God, I'm not in the 4th grade anymore. And so if you go to India, which I haven't been, but I've heard stories of this, death is 1, public, 2, you're exposed to it because you probably live with your parents. And so just throughout one's life, you're going to be exposed to death. And then the way that they do burials, like you can see the body and they put them in the river, the Ganges River, or whatever it's called. And it's just very like, it's like a big part of life, and life becomes more this preparation for death, but much more entwined relationship to death. And also it could be considered like a graduation of sorts. So if someone dies, quote unquote, young, that could also be something like, cool, they didn't need this body anymore. And I don't personally align or misalign with that. I just am aware that it feels like there's a lot of kind of like shadowy kind of curiosity, empty space around the concept of death in our culture, and we just don't want to talk about it.
I was going to ask what you thought the percentage of well-being is attributed to if you were to divide up 100% of physical versus emotional, mental. Like how much of what how would you divide that up? Because that's kind of how I think we'll divide up the time today, because you do deal a lot with the physical body, but I wonder what you think the value of that is as a percentage.
I don't know that it's tough to differentiate a percentage because I think that they are congruent.
Then we have to establish what well-being is.
So if you
Right?
so you could make the body be fit, like physically fit.
Right.
But sometimes, for example, a person might be really flexible, but they might carry a massive amount of tension somewhere in the body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or they might be really strong, or like any of the things. They might seem like in really great shape, but oftentimes what that is, I would fall into this category. They're really brilliant at compensating, and they've oftentimes what looks like the cover of Muscle and Fitness, or you might see like The Rock or somebody like that, and you see that, you're like, wow, he's jacked and awesome and better than me, and like nothing could be wrong in his life. Like, look at that. And so I think that it's easy to get, and I don't know The Rock, so he might be in this bodhisattva category, but it's very easy to get confused by just physical largeness or chiseledness or something of the sort.
You just want bigger muscles all the time. It's always more.
Yeah, or for a girl, bigger butt, or
No,
a
I'm
better
not in that category. No.
waist to hip
I'm like, hi, give me
ratio.
a smaller ass. I want a smaller ass.
Oh, that's good for you. I love that. Bucking the norms of the day.
Yeah.
But so someone, I would say I fall in the category of like a really good compensator. And so an example of compensation in the physical body would be a person that maybe like they pull their shoulders back, they puff their chest out, and then from the top, if they did like a high school yearbook photo, be like, wow, they look pretty good. Like they've pulled it all back, big chest, big strong shoulders. But physically, posturally, what that will do, if you haven't integrated that through the whole body, is you'll just end up tipping the pelvis forward too much and go into hyperlordosis, and you might have your feet end up going a little externally and into pronation, and you just don't see it in the yearbook photo. So you don't see the part that people are looking right at. And so a lot of us are focusing on what do people see and what do I see in a mirror, and that's fine. And it will burble up, and it will manifest itself as something, and so I think
are you saying like a true physical challenge, meaning some kind of back issues or some joint issue? Or are you talking about dis-ease in the body through more things like cancer or autoimmune or something like that, or both?
I don't know about cancer and autoimmune. I just had Gabor Mate on my podcast just like a week ago, or that episode just came out. And he goes really deep into the relationship of like anger towards one's self, or anger in general, swallowing one's anger as opposed to being able to like process and release, and that potentially manifesting itself into something where the body begins to like attack itself, or like if there's maybe some kernel of self-hatred, things of the sort. I don't know enough about that to have any meaningful opinion. The whole field is called psychoneuroendocrinology. People are interested in going deeper into any of that stuff. Peter Levine is a great resource. Awaken the Tiger Within. Bessel van der Kolk is really good as well. The Body Keeps the Score.
Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, all those are really great resources. I have like more of a footing in is I think the way that expresses itself in an orthopedic way, and then also just in body language. So if a person really feels calm, they feel safe, they feel supported, they feel loved, they feel fulfilled, they feel like, like this moment, like I like this. You'll notice probably they're not going to front and puff their chest out in like a prideful way. They'll just allow their shoulders to relax. You'll notice the tone of their voice will probably start to be a little bit more, a little lower, a little slower, a little like, you'll notice their breathing patterns will be more geared towards a long, relaxing exhalation. It's really easy for them to, so, and you'll notice their vision might be less myopically focused, less like a shark, get stuff done, predator prey type relationship. And your eyes,
sorry, let me look away.
Yeah, right, exactly. And your eyes are continuous with your central nervous system and their neurological tissue. That's like, it is your brain. And so all of these, our senses are all interrelated with our our thoughts, feelings, and physiological expression. And so we have bought the idea that, you're Danica Patrick, I'm Aaron Alexander, I'm this is my profession, this is my personality, this is a car I drive, this is who I am. You're also an animal. You're also, like this like mammalian, reptilian, old million-year-old creature or
No, that's a
multi-million-year-old creature.
conspiracy. I'm not a reptilian. No.
Yeah, whatever. You're also maybe spirit, right? You're also maybe a mother, maybe a father, maybe maybe a son, maybe you're also
Godmother.
hurt. You're so many things.
Yeah.
But we, for ease and convenience, we kind of put ourselves into a package for easier processing. But you can just, when you start to look at the body language of a person, I think you see a lot of honesty come out, and it's less story and more just, here you are. Like, your jaw is chronically tense. Your muscles around your neck are clamped down all the time. Your diaphragm is chronically contracted. You're not able to take a full exhalation. Like, you're blocked from exhaling. Exhalation is tied into the parasympathetic nervous system. So perhaps you don't feel safe to exhale. Where did you learn that? Maybe it was something you learned before you even had words, or not. Maybe it's something you learned when you were 15. Maybe it's so it becomes, the emotional aspect of the self. It just is congruent with the physical expression.
So can you separate those in a sense? Like, obviously you're probably not taught like, oh, your exhale is your parasympathetic, and this is how there's more thought, more narrative around breath work these days. But are you saying that you can come at it from the other perspective? Meaning, I feel like it's probably an adaptive sort of thing when you're tense because for some reason you needed to be. You were programmed that way. Something happened in childhood where your environment conditioned you to adapt that way. So can you then now come at it from the other perspective of going like, okay, this is how you get out of being in sympathetic mode to drop into parasympathetic with these modalities that shift your pattern.
Yeah. It's not probably adaptive. It is adaptive.
Yeah.
It's great. Like, it's so cool. Like, the body is so smart, and the body is so honest.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And we don't really listen to it collectively. It's like, interesting.
Oh, yeah. It's when you have something pop up and all of a sudden your whole body's covered in goosebumps, and you're like, and so those for me now, I'm like, oh, that's a yes. Like that's like an energetic quantum field yes through the body. And then other times, you like you tense up in your solar plexus or maybe in your heart, but you're not paying attention, right? You're just like, oh, that's nothing. But really it's information about your environment and what you need to be paying attention to.
Yeah. Or maybe you don't want to pay attention because you prefer the narrative that you have within your mind.
Of course. Right.
Which is also fine. And that's called denial, which is also fine. It's not, I would say, I'm making this up right now. This is the first that I'm going into this stuff, which I can get in trouble in podcasts and recorded conversations where we'll go into territories where, like, I've never been here, but here we are. But I would say that would be denial. Yes. If you are, and I could, be wrong about this. So please, like, play devil's advocate. But if your mind, the story that you have goes against your visceral yes, no, personally, if I were betting, I would lean on the visceral answer or solution compared to the mental answer or solution. Well, and so if your mental has so much bandwidth because you're all like living above your shoulders, you're all in your head, you don't really have a strong relationship to your interoceptive self, which is a 50-cent word for like feeling your internal experience, which is also tied to eating disorders, which is interesting. A person that has lower interoceptive IQ would also have a higher likelihood of having some type of disordered eating, which is kind of interesting. Also, like anxiety and things of the sort, because there's a disconnect from my relationship to myself. Yeah, there's a disconnect with that. I don't want to feel it, or maybe I never learned how to feel it, or maybe I never learned it was safe to feel it, or maybe I never even learned it was a thing to feel, because I've been full on books, podcasts, screens, and what I should do as opposed to who I am. Which I know this is getting like very like maybe metaphysical and out there, but it seems like
I
that's
think
what
it's
you're asking
great. No,
for.
the audience loves this stuff. They love
Okay.
the spiritual, metaphysical, scientific. Yeah, no, I believe that's 100% the case, because whatever happened in your childhood programming taught you that you're to survive, because essentially the point is surviving, right? So when we're a child, we can't feed ourselves. We can't drive ourselves to school. We can't, there's so many things that we can't go to the grocery store yet. So to survive, we do actually need to adapt. And so, disconnecting from those feelings within ourselves that are screaming something, which are telling and giving us information about our parents, our environment, or our caretaker, we have to turn it off. And that's a means of survival.
Yeah. And that's
bad all the time would be hard. So you disconnect.
Yeah. And so coming into that, I think that there's, for me at least, I personally have experienced, and hopefully it resonates with somebody, but some level of denial and maybe even like shame around not being like fully integrated as a man.
Really?
And
how did that show up?
Just not really having availability to vulnerably look at myself in something that's like not like a full.
So your
perfect.
own shame, not someone else making you feel shameful.
No.
Me.
Me feeling subconsciously ashamed because I'm still kind of like locked in old hurt boy modes in certain ways.
But how did you become aware? That's beautiful.
Therapy.
I'm back to therapy.
Yeah. Yes, I think a somatically based therapy, particularly, so there's different versions of that. There's somatic experiencing would be something. Hakomi method would be something. Somatic experiencing comes from Peter Levine. Hakomi comes from, I don't know the founder of that off the top of my head right now. Also EMDR is an example of that at all. Yeah.
Oh, is that a somatic? Really?
Somatic just means of the body. So if you're doing a talk therapy where it's just two talking heads talking about the things in their heads.
Yeah.
I personally don't get a ton of value from that because it feels more like a person giving you fish compared to leading you to water and teaching you how to fish. And I believe that when you are working from a place with a skilled practitioner who is able to observe where are you manifesting some type of contraction or sensitivity or like quote unquote trigger of sorts, where you're like, whoa, like notice your eyes change a little bit, notice you're kind of like self-soothing, noticed your voice went up a little bit when you said that. Like, let's stay with that. There's something there. And they're like, okay, maybe close your eyes. Let's like, okay, now bring your awareness out of your head, out of your story. And, let's just bring your awareness into your chest and just breathe there. You don't need to do anything. Okay. Now maybe bring your awareness into your abdomen, your belly. We're not doing anything, and just feeling into that space and just notice if anything comes up for you. And notice maybe if there's any relationship to, you could maybe you feel anxious, maybe you feel depressed, maybe you have some type of like addictive behavior. There's a way to track the origins of that in the body. And if we can be open and vulnerable enough to kind of open up our chest or open up our abdomen or open up our pelvic floor and say like, okay, like, what do you have anything to say? Anxiety? Do you have anything to say? Sleeplessness? Do you have anything to say? Obesity or irritable bowel syndrome or anger, old repressed rage? Do you have anything to share? And then if you have the availability and the vulnerability, and like the safety and typically the guidance to do that, it's like, oh, you have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I had no idea because I haven't really had the capacity or know how to listen. And then once that journey begins, then you realize it's validated. And you're like, oh, okay, all the stuff that I thought was just a bunch of like new age, like hooey, actually is rooted in something pretty interesting and something pretty impactful. That's the reason so many people are so popped up on it. It's just usually language and deep visceral somatic experience. It's not the easiest to bridge that. Sometimes there's certain people that can bridge that well, and they're, I think, really valuable in culture. But for the most part, it's kind of a lot of people, it's hard to explain, and it's not scientific and it's not measurable, and it wasn't 25 milliliters of repressed rage, and it's not a double blind study. It's like human qualitative experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Western culture isn't really about that as much as we are like quantitative experience.
Well, nobody really likes to see the darkness. Nobody really wants to see where their shortcomings are and where they need to heal. Because essentially, one of the most frustrating parts is that your trauma is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. One of the most important things that my therapist told me a couple of years ago was that no one holds the keys for you. Like, I was like, oh my God, I was like, I have to do this all myself. That's like overwhelming, just to think that like, this is all my fault and my responsibility to heal and move forward from. But essentially that really is the work, is like, how do you shift? How do you become someone that doesn't attract certain patterns or people that are not good for you? And how do you shift your perspective so that you can see things in a new way? And how do you change so that the things that you see change, And but when you were telling stories at the very beginning about the stone figures and things, I immediately thought that was maybe from EMDR. Is that where you saw it? And through an EMDR journey?
I've never done EMDR. You have? It seems like you like it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's so good. I literally just did it yesterday.
Oh, cool.
If you've never tried it, it is like time travel. It is like it is like an ayahuasca trip meets, therapy, because it's very poignant, it's really to the point about something. And then within the modality, which I was trying to always make sure people know, EMDR is not in any way crazy, weird, or challenging or dangerous. It's literally just like, my therapist uses a buzzer in each hand, so that just vibrates back and forth from side to side. It's not something you take. It's not something you have to, it's very simple. But it's like time travel. Cool. I had have you heard of Dr. Amen?
Yeah, I've had him on my podcast a couple times.
I've worked with him a little. I interviewed him as well after I went and had a brain scan, and I was having a conversation with him and my doctor that I have been working with for a long time. And some of the things that he said were the most beneficial to do were, 1, hyperbaric, but 2, EMDR. And he was like, and I had done EMDR a few times, and I thought it was insanely powerful. And the stories that I was able to see were like unbelievable. I could see it not only from an observer perspective of myself, but the other person or the other dynamic I was looking at. I could see even like their own childhood programming of what made them like that and how their parents treated them. I could see higher soul orchestration from an energy or entity above this experience that was like maneuvering and making events happen for the benefit of the experience. Like, it's trippy. But he just was like, it was a great thing to recommend. Make a list of your top 10 traumas and then just go into EMDR and deal with them. Cool. Go fix them. And I don't remember any memory that in the original form after EMDR. I only remember it how I saw it in EMDR.
Yeah, memory is interesting. The idea of like what is memory in the first place kind of gets in like, what is time? But like, memory is a recapitulation it's a memory of a memory of a memory of a memory. So you can develop a story about a thing, and you see this happen in court cases regularly, which is why there's a lot of people that are in jail for their whole life unjustly, because someone had a memory of, it was definitely that person. Is like, nope, your memory was not even close. Like, that is not what happened,
tests.
bro.
Those aren't memory. Paternity tests aren't memory, but other than that.
Memory is interesting because it's painted by our filter of perception.
Well,
and so it goes through filters.
Jordan Peterson talks about this, and someone else maybe, but just that memory happens past, present, and future, essentially, because as soon as you have some event change, now the whole past changes and your future changes. So like with information and the way you remember, like the whole thing is intertwined into being an adjustment of reality in all ways. It's it is trippy. I mean, memory is definitely. What about another sort of topic I've been riffing on with people is the idea of objective reality. and how you just said, your perception, your lens colors the entire event. And so two people don't see the same event the exact same way. I'm betting that two people don't even see necessarily, like if I look outside at nature, like you and I wouldn't even see it exactly the same way. Things stand out, colors may be different. Like, I don't think I wonder, basically the philosophizing is, do you believe in objective reality?
It's painted by your trauma, I would say, largely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the trauma is the part. I think if there was two people that were completely unpacked, let's say that's a possibility. My sense is probably their objective experience of the world around them would be pretty similar in a lot of ways. It would be clear. Once you get a twist in the system, and suddenly maybe I was raised with a dad that hit me. My dad didn't hit me, like we got spanked a few times or whatever, but that wasn't a thing. But maybe you did. And then every time someone raises their hand up to give you a high five, because you have an unprocessed oh God, bracing around that, your experience with that high five dramatically different than someone that doesn't have that quote unquote trauma. So that, I think, is where it really it brews some deep like reactivity. That reactivity really augments a person's perception. And then if a person feels, I think the resting state of the human being is ease. If we feel safe to be at ease, if you learn that it is safe to be at ease, but if you haven't, if you've learned that you need to be on edge, you need to be on the ready. Your dad that hits you comes home, you can hear the subtlest little, the manner in which he opens the door. You become queued up to, oh man, I think he's been drinking. He stumbled a little bit as he came in. Oh, he kind of slammed the door. Oh God, all my sphincters clench up. Like, okay, here we go. Like this is what's happening, and so that changes at a deep visceral level to come into a place of like reactivity. But if a person can actually process all of that and come to a place where, like, I've come into acceptance with all of the things, I've actually seen and heard, and just really deeply felt all of the emotions, and I can actually really come to this present timeline. I'm actually here. My sense is that's probably pretty like a pretty conciliant experience where it's just it's probably a lot of ease, I would imagine. Does that make sense? I know that's a little wondery.
I interviewed a girl, she goes by The Alchemist on Instagram and on YouTube. Sarah Alcaldi is her name. And we had a conversation about objective reality. And she said that the more you see reality through the observer perspective of your higher self, the closer to enlightenment you are, which she's like is not some massive thing. It's just you just understanding that you are everything. But she's like, the more you can see it from that perspective, that is because she said, so if there's a camera, because my example was, 4 people watch a car accident, they all have 4 different stories, no matter how much they want to tell the truth about exactly what happened. And she said, well, and I asked about the observer or about objective. And she said, well, if there's a camera watching the event, that is the objective reality. So the more you can get above the trauma, the more you can get above yourself and your own narratives and perspective and see it from your higher self, the more then you're seeing objective reality. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the idea that like enlightenment isn't that big of a deal. Yeah. I think enlightenment ultimately, I don't know that I might have had like fleeting moments where it's like, oh, this is pretty enlightened for a minute or something of the sort, but it's just, I think it's a sensation of unicity. It's a sensation of connection, that like oneness, all of the things that, hippies talk about. I think that's pretty, and then they do a pretty deplorable job at actually explicating it and turning it into something that's digestible for someone that hasn't had that experience. But I think the idea where I have weariness and skepticism is around someone that feels like they're in some level of like perma enlightenment mode. And that's where I'm kind of like, I just might not be enlightened enough to get that in an embodied way. And so I'm like, okay, like, I feel like you're probably in denial of something, But I don't know that enlightenment operates in that fashion where it's just a permanent thing. I think that like there's I reference Ram Dass a lot because I like him. But he has a bit about all of his neuroses. He still has all of them. Freaking Ram Dass, like it's like there's not many people I think that are beyond. I mean, he doesn't consider himself enlightened, I guess is why he says I'm enlightened in some ways, but I consider him pretty high up in the echelons of consciousness, I guess you could say. And he says he has all of the same neuroses since he's been a kid. It's just before they were like these overwhelming monsters that owned him, whereas now they're like these little kids. And you can see them pop up and like, oh, there's the sexual thing, or there's the greed, or there's the fear of being left out, or here's the and so
it has to be the observer because you're seeing yourself.
This is why like meditation, it structurally changes the gray matter in the brain. Like changes the shape of the hippocampus, changes the shape of the amygdala. It literally it adds size to the hippocampus by sitting there and just being the observer. And then that's not weird. That's just like the brain change. If you drink a bunch of alcohol, your brain changes. If you exercise, your brain changes. If you take a walk, like everything changes the brain. So by you sitting in observation, it structurally changes the shape of your neurological system, which is pretty cool. But so the reason I'm saying that is it's all a choice of where we place our attention. So if you allow your attention to be dust in the wind in the modern world, I don't think it's wise, because when you look at your attention is being vied for by, advertisers largely. So they're trying to sell you stuff. Nothing wrong with that. But oftentimes the way to sell a person on stuff, this goes back to, it was actually the nephew of Sigmund Freud. I'm spacing his name right now, but he was considered Edward Bernays. He was considered the father of modern advertising. And what shifted that approach to advertising, I think it was like in the early 20s, it was around when like cigarettes were becoming popular, was instead of advertising the actual objective qualities of the product, this car is really good. It's got this size engine. It's got these tires, made in America. It's good, good quality. There was a shift into more tapping into one's identity based off of owning this product. If you own this product, you will be the coolest guy at school, and you'll have muscles, and all the girls will love you. And it's like it's selling that selling story of
selling the narrative.
You're selling the narrative of who I could be.
Yeah,
man. If I owned a MacBook, I would be a MacBook kind of guy. But it's baked into the cake to be bombarded by advertisements pretty much all day since you're a baby. Like TV's running, you're driving the car, you see billboards, like it's everywhere. It's not bad, it's just the way it is. And most of them are saying you will be enough when you buy my shit. It starts to shift things around a little bit, and so starting to unpack that, I think it's a whole process. The angle that I come in to any of these conversations, it really is physicality. So, okay, your back hurts, you lack shoulder range of motion, you have shoulder pain, shoulder impingement syndrome, your hips feel stiff, your ankles don't move right, you're limited in your running, you feel just aches and pains, and you just like crepitus in your body. It's like that to me is my starting point, because I feel like that's a great door into all of the conversations. It gets into nutrition, it gets into physical movement.
That just starts the conversation.
Yeah, okay. I think it's a really important starting point, because I feel like a person, unless you've already like drank the Kool-Aid of conversations like this, I think it's hard for a person to be like, that's really interesting, but I'm behind on my rent. I'm freaking out about my ex-girlfriend or girlfriend. I have 2 kids. They need to be fed. My back is in terrible pain. I can barely get out of bed in the morning. Like all this spiritual, psychosomatic, neuro, endo, whatever is like, this is where I'm at. I need to sort this out.
People deal with whatever their biggest problem is at the moment. And so, the world is telling you there's a million problems with, propaganda, with advertisements. You're not enough. You're not cool enough if you don't have this, if you don't have enough more money, if you don't do this and that. And then, so what's their biggest problem? My freaking back is just annoying me every day. Like, that's just where they start. Like, you start with the biggest problem. And so, yeah, you sort of look at the body as essentially like the gateway drug to more what I would call a holistic life.
I think people, maybe three of people's top things would be health, relationships, and money. Those are 3 pain points where it's like, I think spirituality, and all of that stuff. I don't think that's high in the ranking of Western culture, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality, like, there's an interesting book. I'm actually having the author of this book on the podcast coming up, called The Soul of Money. An interesting book, and it's one of the many books that kind of gets into money just being this energetic flow, and the way that we interact with money is it's just a relationship thing. I know. So a person could be backed up on their relationship with money and be chronically saving and hoarding and I don't want to let it go. And then it's like, oh, interesting. Like, well, where does that come from? Do you feel like the shoe is going to drop at any time and you're not going to have enough and you're clenching, waiting for that to happen? Where did that come from? Oh, it might have come because you learned that in a validated way as a young kid or whenever, like, oh yeah, the shoe does drop. It will all be taken away. You need to prep. And then you become a prepper. And so there's the possibility to come back and say, holy shit, the way that I relate to my bank account is pretty darn spiritual in a way, and pretty darn like metaphysical and pretty darn therapeutic. And you could do the same thing with relationships. Oh my God, I'm like clenching down on this relationship, or maybe I'm resisting, I'm staying distant, I don't want to commit. And it's like, oh, well, where did you learn that commitment's unsafe? Oh, maybe you learned that relationships don't work. Maybe you learned that if you do commit, you'll be left, you'll be hurt. You don't want to open yourself. Okay, interesting. Well, we could tap into that.
So you have this physical platform with, the body and alignment and method for that. So then how do you use that? You're talking about all these other they're sort of looking at it in a systemic way. So what is your role then beyond just body awareness?
Great question. What my role would be, where I place my hat, because I don't have enough expertise or depth in the other topics, is the physical aspect. And so if the way that you feel will manifest itself in your tissues, like the issues are in the tissues.
Oh yeah, Mast and Kip all the way.
Right, exactly. So the issues are in the tissues. So I'll just be physical and work on the tissues and work on finding ease and grace and balance and removing the dis-ease from the body, from the lens of movement, which you can do. And then if you're able to actually create change in the body, it will start to spill into other aspects of a person's life. If you've been walking around the world, this is me, growing up very insecure, kind of like broken home type scenario, really like great parents, lovely. I find myself being defensive around my parents. I think it's very common with people in general. Loved me the best that they could, had their own issues, and really pretty decent home for a while. Dad ended up getting into drugs, went to jail, a lot of kind of stuff, percolated there. Now dad's doing really well. He's now like starting to face his own issues around intimacy and things of the sort. We're having conversations about it. Yeah, it's very nice. But my response to that, physical home feels unsafe. I will compensate by building my biological home, my body up as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to get all the muscle and fitness magazines and all the bro magazines and eat all the supplements and be, feeding myself every 2 hours and protein smoothies and creatine and like all of the different stuff. Lots of chicken, lots of farts, lots of just like dis-ease in my intestines. But I got very big, very fast. That led to chronic pain. That led to joint dislocations. That led to becoming a shittier athlete. I played ice hockey for a while. As I got more interesting to look at, my skills on the ice like digressed. It was like every 6 months, I'm like, wow, I'm a worse hockey player. But everyone thinks, I'm like at the peak of my athleticism because I'm really big now. And so it literally, it was like I don't know, it was like an inverted pyramid in a way. Like I didn't have like a foundation. And I think the foundation is, the way that you feel, and the way that I built my body was on top of this foundation of feeling insecure, feeling unsafe, feeling like the shoe's going to drop, feeling like we're not sure if we're going to pay rent or the mortgage, not sure if dad's going to come home, not sure if we're going to have a house. So I'm going to go, whoa, okay, let's build it up. Let's puff the chest out and let's kind of strut through the world to let the world know that I'm safe. I don't need help. I'm okay. And then 20 years later, you start messing up your relationships or messing up your whatever, you need to have something that's deep in order to start to create change. I believe typically it's relationships. I think like love, like for a man, it's like the tenderness and the sweetness of like a woman. It's like, oh, there's something really powerful about that. It does something. And so for me, that was kind of my thing, to be like, oh man, I didn't realize I learned when I was young that relationships don't last. And my parents got a divorce. My dad went to jail. So and growing up, my dad was, I think, kind of like an alcoholic, or like had like issues with drinking. So I gather that now as being like, as a little boy, I would almost have to receive his avoidance and numbing strategies as I'm not enough, right? Or it's not really safe to actually feel like attuned and connected to you, because you're not actually attuned and connected to yourself. Yeah. So me, as this really like vulnerable, imprintable, spongy being that needs to depend on you to keep me safe, I'm going to then reflect that back on myself. And now it becomes my issues because I need you to keep me safe as an infant. So whatever's happening with you, it's I'm gonna take that and just assume that you must kind of have your stuff together. And then, as a 30, 40, 50, whatever year old, a person that comes to a point where they start to reconcile some of that and realize like, oh, my parents are just kids. They were just kids. And they had their own parents, and they were all of these things. And, I think it starts to open up. And then having the opportunity to have vulnerable conversations with one's parents is also, I found that to be really, really supportive as well. Even if I think they've passed, I think there's ways. I think you can maybe write letters to them, or, have your own kind of like more spiritual connection to the parents. But I think that connection to the parents is very valuable.
Your childhood is a certain way that produces a certain kind of pattern. And then that pattern plays out over and over and over again. And so until we see it, and that's the way it happens in my world.
You need to confront it.
Right. So what was that? So was that a more recent realization for you that, okay.
Yeah. Like last 2 months.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's very recent.
Wow. It's crazy. It's so cool.
What's interesting is in preparing for the interview, I heard you saying what your goal for 2022 was in some older interview I listened to. And your goal was to not chase, because once you achieve sort of like a person, it becomes unattractive anymore. And to stop with this dynamic of chasing. So the fact that here we are in 2023, just like, and that a couple of months ago, like, to me, you said the pattern over a year ago. That's what I heard, was like, oh, I'm not gonna.
It's been there for a long time.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And so, but now I'm actually in a like broke down, seeking help place, which is a better disposition. Because then you could actually create change. If you just think your way through things, be like, oh, I'll meditate more. I'll like go eat some more mushrooms or something.
Another ayahuasca trip.
I'll work out harder.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I think really for me, I really needed therapy. I really needed a person. I needed like my sober mind to, take account throughout the week and say like, okay, like what are these, like, where are my limitations? Like where am I not able to push the ball forward on my own? And that's like not an easy thing to admit as a guy. I think for a lot of guys, or for me at least.
Yeah. I want to talk about two directions, but I don't want to forget, but I want to talk about the role of, you said a sober mind, which I get what you mean from a kind of more macro perspective, but also like a truly sober mind versus achieving it through mushrooms or ayahuasca or iboga or whatever kind of modality you want to, whatever kind of medicine you think might give you the answer.
Yeah.
That's one direction. Well, let's just start there. There. Like you say a sober mind. Was a different did you go a different direction to try and sort of reconcile certain things, or did you flounder around in that space for a while, or was it a revelationary, like did you see a lot of truth?
Yeah, I mean, I've done several ayahuasca ceremonies and psilocybin and things of the sort, and I've garnered value from all of them, I would say. And I think there is something really special and meaningful about the same kind of thing of like learning to fish. So in a way, psychedelics, they can teach you to fish, and they can open windows to things that like, oh, I just didn't know that was there. And now I see it. So now I need to go into my sober reality and start to create the structure around that sensation that I felt. Mm-hmm. But I think if you just get the epiphany and then you go back to who you were, nothing's going to change. Like it really was nothing more than like an expensive trip to Costa Rica. So I think you need to have the integration, and you need to have the restructuring, and it takes work. And I think the work comes not being super high on something. I think the work comes in this like sober world. And sober's, kind of a weird word. I don't mean sober, in like the AA.
Yeah, I knew you didn't, but I also was curious about plant medicine anyway.
Yeah, I don't have strong opinions about all of the like AA and all. I've been to AA before for love addiction, and for alcohol, but not because I drank alcohol. I was just interested in the meetings. Okay. And there's something really beautiful about AA, like that being around a group of people that are there. It's very religious in a way. It's very like Christian, which I think there's value in that philosophy as well. And a big part of that is really being like humbled to your knees. Like that's kind of the vibe of AA. Like I was on my feet. I was messing it up. I'm now on my knees. Like I'm prostrating myself. Like I can't do it alone. There's something really beautiful about that. And being around a bunch of people ranging from, successful celebrity, whatever, superstar people to people that are, a meth addict in the street, all being in that place where like I can't do this alone, like I need help.
Vulnerability
is the vulnerability part. It's not it's
the other part of my question had to do with that.
Yeah, I mean it's I think before you start to lean into those aspects of yourself, I think it's I don't know, it's scary. It's just shameful, I think, is the big thing for me. It just feels shameful to not be strong enough, to not be able to be like the provider and the supporter and the teacher and the healer, to be like, no, like I need help. It's not, it doesn't sound sexy to say, but, and then the reality is, I think actually it is quite attractive. If you're stuck in that, then it becomes less attractive, but having access to that it's like a part of being a whole human being, which the meaning of health is an old English word that means whole. So health, whole. And that's where I would come from, the perspective of the physical stuff. The things that I share on the internet are mostly like exercise based and training and mobility and, nervous system regulation using like breathing practices and stuff like that. But behind all of that, I think that these are the things that I think are more interesting to like talk about and, reflect on and think about and integrate in your own self.
Yeah.
How do we become whole? Exclusively physical modalities is a process of becoming whole.
When I think of holy or even enlightenment, it just like I think of light filling in the shadows and the where we split or where we fraction off in our childhood in many, many ways to cope and survive. Like it's about how do we reconcile that aspect that we've closed off, shut down, put in the dark, don't want to see. How do we bring light to the whole vessel, the whole being, the whole consciousness, the whole reality of you.
That's the definition of health. Yeah. And there are for most people, there are shadowy, scary nooks and crannies within ourselves.
Yeah, of course.
And it's and just being open to that as a concept. You don't even necessarily need to buy it completely and be like, okay, like, yep, that's it. But just kind of like set that on the shelf of like, okay, are there any parts within myself that I'm not even willing to look at? And that's one. And at some point in a person's life, comes from my interview with Gabor as well. One of the things he shared was there's like 4 pillars of a healthy child, and one of them is that a child needs to feel safe to express every emotion. So if you grow up and at some point you learn from your caretakers that it's not okay to be angry, or it's not okay to be, sad, or it's not okay to be anything. One of the most damaging things you could do to a child, I believe, and that's what Gabor shared, is instilling that belief that okay, there's some ways of being that are okay, and then there's some other ways of being that are not okay. These are bad. So now I will, instead of feeling my anger or my rage, which is a completely healthy disposition, like you have anger circuits in the brain that's like they're there. And so if you're like, no, we will shut that part down because this household doesn't accept that, then it's like, okay, but now I think it's comparable to like putting a piece of steak under your rug and be like, cool, like we don't see it. It's just we'll just put that right underneath there, and it's fine for a while because I don't see it anymore. What's the steak like in a month? What's the steak like in a year? What's the steak like in 20 years? What does that start to do to the rug? The juices start seeping through the rug. Maybe it starts to grow a little mold. Now you have a whole life. There's a whole ecosystem growing around this initial piece that you weren't willing to look at. The longer you go without addressing it, hiring a carpet cleaner, maybe you need to get a whole new rug. Maybe you need to like do deep work on cleansing this rug and processing this rug. It will just fester and go deeper and deeper into all the annals of your life.
Yeah, it's totally Jordan Peterson. Slay the dragon when it's small before it becomes a monster, A lot of what we're talking about, therapy in particular, is reliant on you being vulnerable. Like, it's probably still not even easy to be vulnerable with a therapist at times for people because they just think, well, I don't need to say that, or I don't want to cry. But men are being called and asked more and more to access this vulnerability within them, to be able to connect with themselves on a deeper level so that they can connect with the feminine. And this is a really fine line between, connecting and not being able to hold the relationship in a masculine way. There's so much talk these days about toxic masculinity, and like, let's not forget there's toxic femininity, and but the masculine and this vulnerability and how you reconcile that, and if you feel like you understand it or are in a good place with it.
I think, yeah, it's just a balance. I think like that. I think culture presently is being instructed more towards like toxic femininity, you'd say, which you don't hear that tossed around too much because it's more like the patriarchy is bad, masculinity bad. Don't be too much masculine. Within that, you will probably get an imbalance in the other direction. And I think that you can go into like maybe perhaps toxic femininity where a person is, I think you can be too much just listening and too much just nurturing and too much just soft and too much just like you also need to like having like that's the father. Like it's like, no, buck up. We need to get this done. Let's go. It's like, oh wow, that was kind of stern. That was like directive. And so if we're just in that, if we're too soft, like David Guy is like, stay hard. Like you don't want to just stay hard, but you also don't want to just stay soft. There's a middle point, right. So it's like bread. There's bread's like too hard, like stay hard. It's like, no, it's too hard. You burnt the bread. It's like too soft. It's like, well, it's not ready.
No.
Right outside. The world's dangerous.
So what do you do? How do you deal with it?
I think you engage. I think you have mentors and peers and people that you look up to and respect. I think I think I'm in process with this personally. I don't think that I'm like a guide in this personally. I feel like I'm very much in process. But I think masculine things would be creating calendars and schedules and things to stay on time, stay on task, be directive. If I say a thing, I will do a thing. Like, keep your word. You could read the Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, like one of the things is just like stay honest, keep your word. I think that's one of them in there. Don't take things personally. Like let it scuff off. Like, it's just like water on a rain jacket. Like, okay, like, yes, but here we are. Let's keep moving. I think you can adjust your masculinity or the way that you show up as a masculine person or that aspect of yourself through augmenting the way that you move. An example of that would be maybe like if you're staring at your phone all day long and you're hunched over in a chair and your body's kind of like dilapidated and collapsed and you're not getting enough sunlight and you're eating a bunch of food that's causing you to have blood sugar issues and all sorts of problems, you're not ready to be of service. Like you're not ready to show up and like be the leader. Like you're at a deficit. That's not very masculine. So masculine is cool. I've done my preparation. I've organized my notes. I've got my fuel in. I've got extra water. Let's go. That's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then the feminine aspect would be practicing meditation, practicing deep listening with friends or a partner, practicing art, practicing dance, like fluidity, spending time in nature, actually like opening yourself up to how does nature move you? How does nature make you feel? How does the sun on your skin make you feel? How does the taste of the grapes that you're eating or whatever sensual experience that you're having, opening yourself up to that? Oscillating between that's not a biological male female thing. That's a human thing.
Totally. Yeah.
And so both of those are valuable. It just so happens generally biological females typically have a stronger disposition towards more feminine stuff, and men typically have a stronger disposition towards more masculine stuff. Men are good at defense. Yeah. Men are good at protecting. Men are good at staying hard. Women are really good at nurturing,
caretaking,
and like connecting with a child and like a home and building like a warm nest. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And we're living in a world where that's all getting a little like shaken up.
So do you think that it's when you're properly in your masculine that you feel comfortable to be vulnerable and get into the feminine?
Probably,
or is this just a separate practice or maybe you could explain perhaps where you feel the most vulnerable? Like what makes you feel like you can be vulnerable? What are those environments?
I think a person that feels insecure will end up compensating, and it will show up as quote unquote toxic anything. So toxic masculinity.
Sure.
So that's the person that, they've got a barbed wire tattoo around their steroided bicep situation, and they've got, a Corvette with flames going out the back, and they're fucking doing donuts. And
what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Oh yeah, that's that's so funny. But like the person where you see it, like it's like all attention goes to that person in the street, really loud music, whatever. It's
I immediately think they have a small penis. Immediately.
Small penis, or they just don't feel seen, and it's to me, and that could be my own projection, whatever. But to me, I'm like, oh, okay, like I see that as like, oh, okay, that person wants to be seen, and so for that, they feel like maybe they're not worthy of being seen. So then they're going to compensate and go into however each person has their own flavor of compensation. But the toxic masculinity, quote unquote toxic masculinity one, I think would probably be like, I don't feel man enough. I don't feel like a supportive partner or mate on a team or in a community. I don't feel dependable. I don't feel like I trust myself. I don't have self-trust. I don't have self-love. So I'm gonna compensate and show you why I am good enough. And then you can come to a point where you start to work through that. And then once that starts to get worked through, either through recapitulating your trauma, which is what a person does, that's like the Peter Levine Awakening the Tiger Within type perspective of all like the somatic experiencing and such, among other trauma-based modalities and therapies and perspectives. But essentially, we will resurface our trauma until we heal it. And so every time you get into a new relationship and, we're doing the same thing. Oh, here we are. Every time there's a story he actually has in that book where there's a man that was in, I believe it was Vietnam or I don't remember the exact war, but on a date, it was like July 7th or something. He lost one of his close friends in war. And he would show up at a Quickie Mart every year on this date, and he would pseudo rob the Quickie Mart with like a fake gun underneath his shirt. It was like his hand. Old, senile, like not really totally with it guy, deeply traumatized. And he would act out this situation. Cops would come, guns drawn. He's recapitulating or recreating this trauma because it's in him. And so he's finding ways for it to come up to the surface, because at a subconscious level, the body, mind, spirit wants to heal. It's a healing system. You get a scar, you cut yourself, the body just heals. That's what it does. If you have a scar and you are irritating it all the time, it's not going to heal. The body wants to heal. You need to remove the barriers to allow it to heal.
Yeah.
And that's like, there's a Rumi quote, I think. He says, your task isn't to love, your task is to remove the barriers restricting you from love.
If you were to sort of break it down for people for a couple of really beneficial physical activities, and then a couple of really beneficial mental emotional activities, how would you guide people to the next level of their awareness of themselves?
I think you could just say the physical, and that would be like tie in with the mental emotional. Obviously, like I said, like I think getting therapy is a good idea if you have a good therapist. I think just seeing someone just talking about your problems, like it could be really good, but I think it really comes like vetting out a therapist. Something that I found really helpful actually was I talked to someone that I know and trust, who is, I'm very grateful that I have access to people like this, who's like a world-renowned coach, therapist type person. So he has access to all of these things. But I seeked out that person, who I'm very grateful is just a friend. So I just texted him, but I seeked him out and I said, here's my thing. Who do you recommend? And he's like, this is it, like this person. So to me, that was a really cool thing compared to just looking up in like the, Googling for therapist near me or something like that. I don't know if that's the best thing, or going through like your insurance or something. I don't know. EMDR is a physical practice. So if you're taking a walk, the way that EMDR was discovered, from my understanding, was the founder, she discovered it from taking a walk and noticing the effect of scanning the horizon. And as you're scanning the horizon, you're going back and forth, you're looking, and you're walking, and you're moving. That's sending the signal to your deep autonomic state, your deep physiology, that, you're moving towards progress, compared to I'm being attacked, and I feel frozen. There's fight, flight, and then there's freeze. Like that's another aspect of that cycle. If a person has the opportunity to actually like move their body and look up into the clouds, scan the horizon back and forth, like mobilize yourself, that's sending a deep signal that you're moving towards progress. So it is an emotional experience. Like that's why a lot of the best ideas come from a person taking a walk. That's why Steve Jobs, invested millions of dollars on having a walking path outside of their facilities so that his employees could go be creative and take a walk and get sunlight and get outside. That would be one thing I would say, just like get outside. Most of the modern diseases, they're you could refer to them as diseases of mismatch. And what that means is just our physiology is mismatched to this modern environment that we created. So we created this really convenient environment, but we neglected the fact that a lot of that inconvenience is actually what turns us at a cellular level. So now we take that off of the table, and now we outsource all of that healing movement to technology. And we just get kind of like stuck up and claustrophobic and dehydrated in our own cells. You need to move. You need to express in order to be healthy. It's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
So easy ways to do that, I would say, would be, and this is like I wrote a whole book about this essentially, is how to integrate fitness into who you are as a person, as opposed to it being like this compartmentalized thing that you do 3 days a week. Your whole day is fitness. And so an example of that would be like, take walking meetings. You're getting natural sunlight, full spectrum sunlight, as opposed to sunlight through a window, which you're blocking out a certain spectrum of the light. So that's a big deal as well. So you need to get out of, just because you have a window in your house, it's better than not having a window, but you need full spectrum sunlight. It's like eating a supplemented form of food. Yeah. You just need food. Like your body runs on sun.
Yeah.
So sunlight, like incorporating that into your quote unquote fitness. Walking is a really beautiful way to help with consolidation of memories. So if you're working on like a hard problem of some sort, or just work in general, you're studying for a test or something, maybe study hard for some duration of time that feels good for you. And then intentionally say, cool, instead of taking a break from this and checking my notifications on my phone and like kind of dilapidating myself over into this position and staring into my phone, I'm going to intentionally walk outside, move my body, integrate the hemispheres of my brain / the rest of my body, and reflect for a moment and like process. Like that's walking is one of the greatest things you can do for yourself. And it's not sexy, and that's how you know it's good. Like most of the sexy stuff are not that long of levers for your health. It's the long levers are pretty simple.
Shit. I mean, CrossFit is a perfect example of that. That's not a very long lever, man. That runs its course before you end up being beat up.
The long lever aspect of CrossFit is community. And that's the longest, that is the longest lever, I would say. Sunlight, I would say, is probably the first. Sunlight, nutrition, and then community. I would say like the base fundamentals, like you need to eat and you need sunlight. Next is community. Period. There's nothing, it's not money. It's like you need community. Community makes money. You don't make money without community. You don't make money alone.
I mean, I don't remember if you've talked to Zach Bush or not, but the first time I interviewed him back in 19, he studied cancer cells and what created cancer. And it was a lack of cell communication. Correct. Which is essentially, I believe that this universe is fractal. So like we are an aspect of that. And so when we fall out of community, when we fall out of cell communication, then bad things happen.
Yeah. Or the right thing. It's signals. If we don't do the thing, signals happen. The best definition for pain that I really value is pain is a request for change. So pain's just your body's way of saying, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is. If you listen enough, it's like a relationship. Like your relationship to your body is a relationship.
Oh my God. So, yeah. It's telling you things. And like, you think it's not actually telling you things. It is. If you listen to your intuition, if you actually try and take a second and pause and just trust it, even though it doesn't always tell you what you want to hear, there's actually information within the signal of pain.
Relating your relationship to pain as just a conversation, and it's just a request for change, and it's just communication, and it's not bad. You're not wrong. It's not like it's not something to be destroyed or attacked. I'm going to attack the pain. It's like there's ways to actually come into relationship with it and listen even more. And within that, I think it's if you do allow yourself the spaciousness to listen, and typically it involves like hiring help, I think is really helpful if you have the resources to do so, or maybe read books, YouTube videos, things of the sort. to get to the bottom of the thing. But I don't think there's a such thing as pain expressed in the body that's just because the body is malicious and just because life is hard. I think it's all miscommunication, and the body is trying to convey a message, and the way that it speaks isn't in English or Spanish or whatever. The way that it speaks is in sensation.
Yeah.
And the way to tap into it is through tapping into your sensation, which comes into very, I think, feminine approach. That's the feminine.
Yes,
I need to listen deeply.
Feminine. What is the information telling me? And I think the word that just came to mind, which is obviously such a word for you, is when you're out of alignment, the body will give you information.
Yeah.
Whether it's emotional alignment, mental alignment, physical alignment, your body's going to give you information when you're out of alignment.
Yeah. It'll feel like chaos. It's the same thing if you have a railroad track and there's a train going down it and the track is in misalignment. It's going to create noise and sparks and all that. In the human experience, that would maybe look like anxiety or fill in the blank thing. But anxiety to me looks like sparks and noise, and it's like that's the feeling of it.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes within the spiritual community, I experience sometimes like a lack of stability, a lack of ground, earth. And so within that, I think sometimes it's like what the body needs in that situation is maybe some bone broth, or maybe some deadlifts, or maybe some bench press, or maybe you need iron. You need to feel resistance and feedback, and you need to organize and recruit yourself, and you need to push. And you need to go, you need to think you can't do it, and you need to keep going through. That's whoa. That masculine now. Okay, I understand.
I know that one well.
Yeah. I mean, and then you can go too far with that, where now you're not listening. You grind too hard. That's kind of the issue with much of the CrossFit world. That makes sense that there's probably reasons that you were attracted to that in the first place. Probably relates to your personality and old stuff from before that. It's not bad. It's not good. We just seek out the things that we're biased towards based off of our history. And the more that we know about ourselves, the more that we can make more informed decisions as the observer, and also, the engager. You don't want to just observe. You also want to be in it, because then you can get you can be too, I'm observing. It's sometimes you got to let go of observation too. Wow. If you want to dance, you don't want to be in the observation of the dance. You want to be in the dance.
You're right, because one of the last epiphanies in a psilocybin journey was that I was this waveform, and that's what I was at a baseline reality, and that this sort of experience of being a human was just waveforms intersecting, and it's truly just for your experience. So you can't just be observing of that's the dynamic. You got to be able to feel it. And so I remember I was laying there and I was cold. And then I was like, wait, I'm not actually cold. This is just waves intersecting. And then it was the energy was told me, no, it's okay. Grab a blanket. You're just cold. It's just the experience of cold. It's not you have to deny its reality. It's your reality in this realm. And so, you just kind of, have experiences, allow yourself to, it's the learning, in my opinion, will never end. And that we'll always be on this journey of continuing to, peel away the layers of our conditioning and of where we have, fractioned off and hid certain aspects of ourselves because they didn't serve whatever was going on in our life. So I don't know, let's finish off with what I'm curious, what's the next thing? I was kind of inspired by you saying what your goal in 2022 was, which sounds like what became a reality. You sort of arrived at this challenge or this awareness of yourself. So what's 2023?
We just launched a program, which I can pitch, but I won't pitch it too hard. But that's been something we've been focused on for the last year. And that's been really big for me around organization. It's just saying a lot of the stuff that I've done on the internet, my background is this somatic therapy type stuff, but manual therapy. So Rolfing and working with organs, visceral manipulation, craniosacral therapy type stuff, and then physical movement, training people to move better. And then that shifted into starting this podcast 8 years ago. And that was around just having conversations with people that I was really inspired by and wanted to learn from. And then starting social media. And it's been like historically a lot of stuff of like, okay, like just what I'm interested in, kind of a lot of stuff you hear from this conversation. And like, what is my role of like my service? Like, where do I serve the world best? But that quality I think is very fulfilling. Feeling like, oh yeah, like, especially for probably a lot of guys, or maybe just all people, but that sensation, like, what is my role in the tribe?
Sure.
Am I a carpenter? Am I, am I an electrician? And so that's been really supportive to me to really define things. That writing the book, the Align Method, was supportive for that as well. But then doing the program even more, because it's broken down into six weeks. Each week is very specific. And the offerings within that, it gives me definition and containment of like, this is what it is. If it's not within those 6 weeks, then it's not really a part of the brand so much presently. And so that's something I'm really excited about, is creating more definition and structure within my business. And then within like the heart stuff, I think really facing head on intimacy and commitment, and not being a coward, I think, is a big thing. I feel like I'm a coward. I've historically been very much like a coward of like being afraid, and I'm good with that. Like I'm good with not being that, and opening myself up to taking bullets, and be like, okay, like I'm going to open myself up to this, and I might get destroyed. I will be destroyed. Like, it's going to happen. And if you open yourself up to love, you're going to have a much more enriched, fulfilled, like open experience with life. And at some point, your love everything has its sunrise and sunset, and it will be painful. And I think that
I don't think that's true. You say that there might be someone out there that's like the bodhisattva, like has a total enlightenment. You're like, but they might be out there. So I think that it's important that you understand that it might be out there, that you're not turned to ash by being ready to take the bullet, by being ready to step into it. There's absolutely a chance that won't happen.
Yeah, maybe, but grief is important. I don't think.
Well, you can grieve aspects of yourself that have to die, but it doesn't mean that a person's going to do that to you.
No, I don't mean do that to me. I mean they're going to die, or they're going to like life. Any person that you choose to open your heart to, say you're in a beautiful relationship with someone for 30 years or whatever. Not that that's the ideal. Maybe, I don't know. There's probably a lot of models of relating to people that could work. My preference is more towards that. But at some point, one of you is going to die.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant that it would be like some tragic relationship.
No. I'm saying, okay, if you open yourself up, there will be grief.
Oh, sure.
And so like, just accept, like, like I'm here for it. Sure. Like, I'm like, I know this is going to be hard. And that's what life is. That's me opening up to like actually eating the avocado of life, as opposed to like, I don't really try. I don't know if they might have salmonella. I don't know. I'll just read about avocados, and I'll like pontificate, and philosophize about avocados and their depth and meaning. Because I know, eat the fucking avocado, like take the risk. And so I think that would be something for me, is really facing head on, like, where am I still afraid? And where do I still have subtle levels of maybe sabotage or maybe manipulation of other people, of myself, and just being very honest with those parts and not seeing them as, bad or shameful, but just seeing them and saying, oh, this is what it is, like that. Wow. Like, whoa, like I wasn't even willing to look at that before. So I'd like to keep on learning, I guess, about all of those parts that I haven't been able to see.
I love hearing about a man's journey and how he flows through the landscape of what it is to be a man these days. I don't think that the culture makes it easy these days, but also makes it so much more open for it to look so many ways. So, and to be honest, so well done. Well done. Let's all get in alignment.
I'm with that. Thank you. I appreciate that, Danica. I appreciate the reflection of that. I think that sometimes that can be like not always the easiest thing to like receive compliments. Sometimes for people, it's like easier to receive like, oh, how could I do better? But for to actually receive someone that's like, oh, this is like, you're doing good.
Thank you. Thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.